Hi, this is Brett Senkis. I am an M&A advisor. I do that out of a company called Brayton Woods, and I am an M&A corporate attorney. I do that out of Senkis Law. Today we are talking about preparing your business for sale, or steps you can take to ensure a successful M&A at hopefully maximum value or maximum sales price. If you like what you hear today, you want more of this, there are a ton of free resources. There's templates, there's checklists, there's infographics, there's articles and videos at merger-resources.com, so check that out. Okay, steps you can take to prepare your business for sale. Now, I'm going to give you 6 of those today. One of those is something you can do right now, even if you're going to sell tomorrow. The other ones require a little bit more time. Some of them require up to a couple of years. There's no time too early to start preparing your business for sale if you know you want to exit at some point in the future. And taking some of these steps may not make a difference, but it may make all the difference in getting a deal done or not getting a deal done. And it may make a difference at the margin, help you get a higher sales price. So definitely be thinking about these things because they're very helpful. In my experience, sellers show up ready to sell one day, haven't thought about any of this stuff. So spend some time on this in the next year or two. Again, even if you're selling next week, I'm going to give you something to do that will improve things. And so that first something, which is something you can do right now if you're selling immediately, is to get your back office in order, to get your contracts and your records complete and organized. Now, this isn't a very sexy suggestion, but it is really important. There's a process when you're selling your business called due diligence. The buyer will produce a checklist of all the things they want to see. Usually it's after you have a signed letter of intent and you're moving down a path with one exclusive buyer, and they're going to ask for all this information. You post it in Dropbox, or there's other sites called the Intralinks and ones that are built for due diligence. They're called data rooms, online data rooms. You'll have to upload all this information. Having that all organized and ready to go is really helpful. And by that I mean, if your business is very contract driven, make sure your contracts have every page, make sure that they are signed, that you've got that all in order. Make sure that your corporate records, your minutes of meetings, resolutions, things like that are organized, that you've done some of that. If you've got a corporation, in every state that I'm aware of, you have to have an annual shareholders meeting. Do you have that documented? So there's a little bit of cleanup there. Again, not super sexy, but get things in order. So it will make the process much easier later on. It will also ensure that the buyer doesn't feel concerned about how you've run the business. Now, I know it's very common for business owners to have their head buried growing a business, and sometimes the record keeping kind of is an ancillary consideration. I get it. Doesn't mean we should read a ton into that, but buyer doesn't have a lot to go on, and that would be one data point. If all of a sudden the contracts aren't complete, you don't seem to know where things are, it's taking time, where are the signature pages, it's like, yeah, what else is there under the hood? It's the equivalent of when you go to buy someone's car and they've got perfect records of every time they've had the oil changed on time, that sort of thing. It's like, gives you a lot more confidence than a person who doesn't. Doesn't actually mean that much in the end, but it could carry a lot of weight. If there's undocumented deals, things like you've granted some equity to people, there's promises that aren't on paper, get that stuff on paper if it exists. It makes buyers really uncomfortable when it's like, oh, yeah, well, we promised to give someone some equity. Yeah, we got to do that at some point. It's just like, whoa, that's a serious thing. It should be documented. What else could be out there? So get the back office in order. So that's number one, and you can do that today. No matter when you're selling, you can get at that. Number two, and this takes a little bit more time, but it's sort of a type of record keeping issue, is you're specifically improving, sprucing up, and cleaning up your financials. So your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, things like that. So I'm not suggesting you cook the books or anything like that. I mean, there's only so much you can kind of do, but in a lot of times in small business, the financials are not super tight. There's things that aren't classified necessarily properly. A lot of the CPAs, and sometimes like in Austin, business owners might go to, there's something called like a tax, I think it's called the tax trailer. They go down there, it's like H&R Block kind of, and I'm not saying they're not good to people to file tax returns, but like there's not a lot of input from people who are looking at the quality of the financials and how are things displayed and how are they categorized. They're just trying to get taxes filed. I would encourage you to spend some time with a CPA, an accountant that really knows their stuff, to think about like, how are these presented? Are they clear? Are things properly categorized? You don't want to confuse buyers. You don't want to generate a lot of questions. It doesn't help engender confidence. And then there's things that are run through the business that are that you can justify deducting that you may choose not to deduct, perhaps. Certain perks and things that may be a little bit aggressive to begin with. It could be gym memberships and things like that that maybe are on the line to start. Taking those out will make the financials look a little bit better. When we present the financials, we recast them, which means we already make adjustments for those things, but it would be better if we didn't even have to show it. Now, there's a business cost to that, so you have to be kind of thoughtful about that and what you do. But again, there might be some opportunities to make the financials look a little bit better by not having the same amount of expenses. Some business owners, I encourage you to be very careful about this, but some business owners will spend a little less money on marketing and things like that. Be careful. You don't want to harm the business in any way. And a lot of buyers are sophisticated enough to spot those issues, so there's only so much that helps, but there may be some things that you can kind of do. An issue that comes up often is whether or not the financials are GAAP compliant, generally accepted accounting principles. Most small businesses aren't, at least when it comes to footnotes and things in my experience, but there may be some things you can do with your CPA to get them a little bit tighter or to maybe make them entirely GAAP compliant. So it's a conversation to have about the financials. Again, some of that requires some more planning to get that where you want it to go. Okay, action item number 3, and this requires more planning, depends on how long, but a few months, 6 months, a year, is to eliminate unknown issues, resolve open matters. I'm specifically referring to risks or the litigation, lawsuits, proceedings, investigations, things of that nature. Buyers are very risk averse. They're scared of the unknown. They're scared of things they don't know. And just generally, risks and open issues in the business that aren't resolved they're going to cost you more as a seller than they're probably worth, because the buyer's just not wanting to step into that unknown. There's a lot of other businesses they can look at. So if there are open tax investigations or open proceedings or environmental issues or litigation, those things sometimes can't be resolved like that. Or the only way to resolve them would be really not favorable to give in on certain things. Remember, it's not as simple as, we'll just escrow for it. We'll just explain it to the buyer. They'll adjust it. It's like, it would be better to eliminate the things that are open and for which it's hard to really quantify or know exactly how it's going to go. It would be much, much, much better to just get it off the table. So if you can do that, if you're close to getting something resolved, it's one more reason to resolve it and to close those open issues and take away those unknown risks. Because buyers there's other businesses they can buy. They tend to be very risk averse, and they're going to hold that against you, probably in the form of not doing a deal if it's a big enough issue, rather than reducing the purchase price, but they might do it either way. And it's just, they might want a higher escrow, which is to hold on to your money for longer, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but not a great thing, if you could take care of the issue. So think about the risks out there and think about whether or not you can clean those things up. There's some specific things you want to take a look at in your business. One is intellectual property. So this is kind of relates to record keeping a little bit, but the general state of intellectual property law in the United States is that if an employee produces work product for you, produces intellectual property on the job for the business, that you own it as the business owns it. But if they're independent contractors, right, they're not W-2 employees, they own it. So if someone builds you a website, someone produces marketing collateral, like that's theirs unless you get the right language in an agreement to get those things assigned. So you may be able to go back and clean some of that stuff up. Certainly starting now, if you have some cleanup, now's a better time to do it than when you're a week out from closing a deal and you've got no leverage with whoever you're talking to, whether or not maybe you don't have any anyway, depending on whether or not the work they've done for you is all done. But again, planning now gives you more time and more ability and less desperation to get some things cleaned up. So there I'm talking about trying to get the proper assignments of the intellectual property before the buyer brings that up as a problem. And the important intellectual property is going to be really significant stuff. A website is probably just files and copy that you could probably redo in most businesses without that big of a deal, or the buyer might not even want. But an app, if the business is an app, if everything was built, everything was developed by outside developers and you never got that done, that's an issue. If there's a major contract that's coming up for renewal, yeah, you want to get it renewed. Again, that's kind of an uncertainty and a risk that you might just think, oh, well, hey, the buyer will handicap for it or something. Like, yeah, I mean, they may, but they're going to over-handicap. Again, unknown does not help you. You know, you might look at it, you know your business, you know it's not that big of a deal. They only know so much, right? So try and eliminate all those unknowns. If there's a big contract coming up for renewal, try and get it renewed. That's one that you can work on today if you're selling very soon. An issue that takes a little more time to work through, but is worth working through if you have the time, is to try and eliminate key dependencies. This is an operational issue, and by this I mean if you are highly dependent on a particular supplier or vendor for something, or highly dependent on a particular customer that represent a large portion of your revenue or a large portion of the supplies you purchase, you need to take some steps, not just for an M&A deal, for the health of your business, to try and become less dependent. So it's generally considered above 10%. If more than 10% of your revenue comes from one particular customer, you have a customer concentration issue. Now, is it a major issue at 10% or 11%? Probably not, right? But at 40%, 50%, you're gonna have trouble getting a deal done, maybe. So take some steps. What can you do to work on that? So I'm sure that's probably already on your mind, but I can't encourage you enough that now is the time to take care of that. Those are really reasons that businesses do not sell those kind of dependencies. Action item 4 is systematize your business and get yourself out of it. So this is a particular problem down in the Main Street part of the market. So we're talking businesses that sell for $2 million or less. They are often run by a sort of force of personality CEO who's in the middle of everything. It might be in the middle of everything because they cannot delegate anything, or because it feeds their ego, or because no one knows how to do anything. And so that's a risk, and it will come up when you're during your deal. So take some steps to make your business work without you. Maybe you can have someone else sign the checks. Maybe other people can sign off on certain things, like get delegations of authority to other people. The more you can show the buyer that there's other people here doing things, it's not all about me, especially if you want to cash your check and head off and sip cocktails on a beach for the rest of your life and not work for the buyer. You got a real issue on your hands. There's a fellow called John Warlow, and he's got something called the Value Builder System, and it's great. He's got really good structure and jargon around some of these issues and how to make your business more sellable, and he calls this one the hub and spoke. And it's definitely a problem when you're the center of everything. And then systematize your businesses, try and get things working better, get scopes of authority, get processes, get things more streamlined, get things working online better, have things be just easier to hand off to a buyer, less dependent on you, and more systematized. It will really help you get a deal done, help you get better value for your business. Number 5, and also this one takes time, probably the most time of everything we're talking about, but it is also the greatest payoff in my mind. And there's 2 really, really important concepts that a buyer is looking for when they're purchasing a company. The first is recurring revenue, and the second is growth potential. So recurring revenue, there's some businesses like law firms or M&A advisories that don't have recurring revenue. We get paid by projects, we get paid when we do work. But even in those kind of businesses, there are opportunities to move some clients to retainers, to have clients buy hours in advance, to do things, maybe not in M&A advisory, but in the law firm world, or to create, it could be courses or books or something. It doesn't have to be a lot of what you're doing. I mean, your business, if you're professional services, it's rarely going to be highly contracted long-term recurring revenue. I mean, some businesses, but like a law firm's never going to get there in most cases, but they can take some steps to at least make it look a little bit better, right? And that's really valuable and can go a long, long way. So this is one of those ones that if there's just nothing in your mind or nothing you can figure out can work, I mean, you can only just jam the round peg in a square hole so much. I mean, if it's just not there, but there might be something you're thinking, yeah, I kind of thought about having a retainer option, or I know lawyers who basically the clients pay a flat fee and they have kind of a hotline and they can call for an hour or two it's kind of like a retainer, but it's basically something they sign up and that's longer term revenue. I know a startup lawyer who basically gets his startup clients to commit to a certain amount of money over the course of the next year and a half. It's like, and it's not a small amount of money, but they don't have to pay a big check up front. You know, it's committed over time, and they have a lot of their needs met. And it's sort of an easy buy for a lot of startups who don't want to cut a check for 5 or 10 grand or something for a lawyer to do all this stuff. Instead, they commit to basically paying 20 over the course of the next year and a half. It's kind of not that simple, but the point, I mean, it's not just about paying more and deferring it. There's a little more in the way of service, but my point is every month, like, he's got stuff coming in. So that goes a long way if there's things you can do. Growth potential. Another one where there's only so much you can do if there's really nothing in your mind, or you're just not going to get around to actually making some efforts to do something. But what we do as M&A advisors is we will present the opportunities of the business, the low-hanging fruit, what a buyer can do, things that the seller's not currently doing. That's always looked at partially with a skeptical eye. It's looked at with a skeptical eye because it's what every seller says. Oh, we can do X, Y, and Z. Like, everyone's got the list of things, and so it's discounted by buyers a lot. Some of the items might be more credible than others. The reason the seller hasn't already taken advantage of these opportunities, sometimes more credible reasons than other times. But again, all of it will be discounted pretty heavily if none of it's underway. But you don't have to actually have completely entered a new market, right, to get some benefit out of showing a plan to enter a new market, that you've looked for some office space, that you've identified a lead in a region, that you've taken like some steps, right? That helps show, hey, not only are they saying there's this big opportunity, they're actually moving on it, right? Even if they haven't moved a lot, it can really help with credibility. Put yourself in the shoes of a buyer. They're discounting everything. They know you want to get a deal done. They know your advisor wants to get a deal done. They're not expecting you to outright lie, but they're expecting you to be puffing and maybe kind of like really polishing the turd, so to speak, right? I mean, making things look a little bit better than they are. So you get credibility by showing any concrete movement on a plan. Any, right? So think about that. Back to my recurring revenue, if you were going to generate a course and you were going to sell it to people, you're not going to get really credit for revenue that doesn't exist today. That really is going to be, buyer's going to have an expectation that that's theirs to capture for the most part, but you might get some credit about some of that growth potential or recurring revenue if you can show steps to moving down that path. So something. And hey, you might not sell your business and you might actually get down that path sooner than later. So those things are really important to think about from the standpoint of getting a deal done, improving how your business looks. So the sixth action item, and this one's really easy, and you can start if you're selling tomorrow, you should be on this one. If you're selling in a year, it's not too early to start thinking about who your advisors will be, to start developing relationships, have some conversations. There's no point in reaching out to an M&A lawyer 2 years in advance, but 6 months out, certainly a CPA or a really good M&A advisor who talk about, as we talked about earlier with the financials, is there something I can do? Get some advice from them about specific things, get them engaged, build those relationships. That will help tremendously and probably give you some excellent advice and feedback. So those are 6 action items. They are all of some value. There are others. If you've sold a business or you practice in this space and you've got an idea and I didn't hit on it, please drop a comment. Would love to hear from you. And check out Merger-Resources. There's a lot more of this over there. It's all free. So checklists and ideas and all sorts of stuff if you liked what you heard here. So thanks for stopping by today.